What's up, bookworms? This is Megan coming at you with another Cantina conversation. Today's episode features a chat with Craig A. Knippenberg. We're talking about his book, Shame-Free Parenting, Building Resiliency in Times of Hardship, Guns, and Social Media. Such an enjoyable conversation, probably one of my favorites so far this year. I really enjoyed just hearing Craig's insights as a professional on all things parenting, and more specifically, as the book is titled, The Hardships That Today's generation of parents have to endure, unique problems that previous generations of parents didn't have to deal with. But either way, I'll let you guys get to it. Here is Craig. Today we've got Craig Knippenberg. We're talking about his book, Shame-Free Parenting, Building Resiliency in Times of Hardship, Guns, and Social Media. Craig, thank you so much for joining me today. I so glad I got the opportunity to read this book. Being a parent of two small children myself, I felt it was very informative and reassuring. So I appreciate it. I'm excited to dig a little bit deeper today.
Thank you very much for having me on. I've been looking forward to it, and I love the name of the podcast, Cantina Book Club. That's pretty cool.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
it was I started doing it with my cousins. They did the Nerd Cantina for like all nerd news, entertainment, tech, stuff like that. That they haven't I was doing a side segment with the books, but then they decided to discontinue, and I was like, "Do you care if I do treat this as like a spin-off and I keep
yeah,
using like the name or whatever?" And they're like, "No, that's fine. Go ahead." And so here I am like a year later, still doing it. And so I'm glad you were looking forward to it. I appreciate
yeah.
it.
No,
I
we're
appreciate it.
excited.
So to get started, can you get like a summary of the book so that people can follow along with the conversation if they haven't picked the book up yet?
Yeah, it's broken down. The introduction in chapter one is really about good enough parenting, and that's all you need to be. There is no A in parenting. And you wouldn't want to have an A. You'd probably drive your kids over the edge along with yourself. But it really is just being this side of good enough. And I started, it's based on my podcast, which I started during COVID. And I was asked to do a lecture for a financial firm in Singapore for their parents and employees on how to survive COVID. And I had the ten strategies for getting through COVID and building a resilient family. And then I just turned that into the podcast. But the first part is there's no research that if you parent this way, your kids are it's gonna change their trajectory in life, that they're gonna be superstars, because that's not true. There's no research that shows that. There is plenty of research that shows you can dope down your kid's trajectory. So if you're abusive, you lack housing security, food insecurity, drug and alcohol abuse, poor health care, poor education system, that will take a kid lower than their genetic potential. But once you're this side of good enough, your kid's going to be who they're going to be. And you don't have to follow the modern gentle parenting approach and do things perfectly and never show you're upset, which is impossible. No parent could do that.
Mm,
I once did a talk
mm-mm.
for a Christian school, and so I was talking with them about the same concept, and I said, Jesus only got mad a couple of times, and it was considered justified anger. But he never had a preschooler.
Yeah.
If he had, he might have been yelling too. So it really isn't possible, nor would it be helpful. Kids learn when they're being loved, they're learning, right? And nurtured and taken care of, and all the stuff you do as a mom for a 4-year-old and a second grader. You're filling their emotional cup all the time. But kids also learn and build strong relationships when there's discord. So when there's a conflict between two people, could be the parent and child or between the siblings, which is always going to exist, it's the
Mm,
repair of that. In psychology, the old term was rapprochement, which means you come back together. If you think of an accordion, so the accordion spreads out when there's discord, but then you bring it back together again and you repair, you apologize, you learn it. It's a learning opportunity for how to change things next time, right? That actually builds strong relationships. Without that, you're fragile. It's like you've never been tested. Trees grow when the roots on trees grow, and aspen trees, which we have all over Colorado, they grow when there's wind. So the more wind, the bigger the roots get. They spread out to hold it up. If there was no wind, they wouldn't grow that big root system and they'd fall over. And that's the same for your kid. So it's really not possible to do those things as the trend right now, nor would it be helpful for them. I think the number one, and I talk, and then the next chapters of the book are sort of ways to build resiliency. And one of those is structure. You have a structured family life, just like schools have structure for the children. Imagine a school teacher that never had the same structure every day. The kids it'd be chaos. They need
Mm,
routines, they need structure, and consistency. So if you look at the research on, okay, what's the number one problem parents might have that cause child misbehavior? And it's parental inconsistency. So that
mm.
means when you say these are our rules for the family, that you apply those rules in a fairly consistent manner. Now, that doesn't mean 90 to 100% of the time. It's not possible. Before COVID, I've been doing lectures on this for quite some time, and I'd say just get a B. If you can be
Yeah.
consistent 80% of the time, that's good enough. And then would say, unless you have a preschooler or a high school or a teenager, then you're
Yeah.
shooting for 65% of the time. During COVID, and by the way, families weren't ever meant to have that much time together the way we did during lockdown. That is so abnormal. That's not how our ancient ancestors lived. You were out working all day and hunting and all these things. You weren't meant to be cooped up together all day long, day after day. And after COVID, I adjusted it to, okay, 65% of the time is good enough unless you have a preschool or a teenager, and then 51%. You're just fine.
At 51. Yep.
Yeah, that's all you're going for. And it
Yeah.
relates, those two categories relate to brain development. And we know for toddlers, preschoolers, they have very limited frontal lobe functioning, so they don't stop their impulses. And they're very emotional. They have twice the emotional output as elementary age children, like your second grader, or older, past the teen years. And adults, they have twice as much emotion. So they can't stop that emotion and it comes out. In the research, the most violent age of humans, meaning committing acts of aggression per hour more than any other age group, are preschoolers. They're like mini terrorists. The
I
sec-
wonder about that too, because I was like, I don't know if it's a second born thing or because I don't remember my oldest being just choosing violence every day like my younger one does.
yeah,
And it's just, we don't do, because you do mention corporal punishment. We don't subscribe to that
right.
in the house. And I don't know, it's not like they watch violent television or anything like that. So I'm like, I guess it makes me feel a little bit better that they're just prone to it. It's just,
Well,
that's what, where they go
there's kind of
to.
two parts to that. One, he's the second, so he's got an older sibling to compete against.
Yep.
And when the older
Yeah.
sibling's dominating, you got to assert yourself somehow. In my family, growing up in St. Louis, there were five kids. And if we ate family style at dinner, mom would put out all the dishes in the middle of the table. And if you wanted a second pork chop, you had to eat your first one fast and then stab your fork if you wanted another
Yeah.
one before your brother got it. So you learned how to
Mhm.
stand up for yourself. But the other thing, and you alluded to this, that's really critical for parents to understand, and it's what my first book's all about, actually. The first book's called Wired and Connected, and it's social, emotional, and behavioral development for kids. And what I describe in there, and it's all easy brain stuff that's very easy to understand. I taught it to children for 27 years. I invented my own brain-based curriculum. But kids have different temperaments. So some kids are like Winnie the Pooh. They're easygoing. If they fall down on a walk, they just say, "Oh, bother." But they're mud in a tree and they're happy again. And then you have kids who are piglets that are pretty happy, but they fall down on the walk and they say, "Oh no, I have to go home. Walks are dangerous. I could get hurt." And they get consumed with anxiety. And then you have the rabbits of the world who are not the happiest fellows unless everything's perfect. And Rabbit
Yeah.
falls over the rock and he says, "Stupid rock, I hate rocks. You're not my friend." And he kicks it. And the rest of the walk, he's mad. He's thrown every rock he sees. And then you have some kid's temperament who's a bit like Eeyore, So they fall over the rock and they say, even the rocks don't want to be my friend. Nobody wants to be my friend. And they're miserable the whole time walking along on the path. And then you have children who are like Tigger. They fall over the rock and they say, that was great, I want to do it again.
Yeah.
And they keep falling over the same rock till they're bloody and bruised and it's nighttime and they're like, that's the best walk I've ever been on in my life. So every child has their own temperament and they have their own unique frontal lobe functioning. Now, in my book, I call the frontal lobe the president of the brain. It's in charge of the rest of the brain. The lower half is for impulse control. So your second grader might have had a stronger frontal lobe, stronger president, which stops when so the emotions rise up in the brain and that frontal lobe comes out to meet them. It's like the defense on basketball. So the team's got the ball, they're coming down the court, they're upset, they want to score, and the defense comes out to slow them down. And some children have really well developed frontal lobes, great presidents. They always stop their emotions and then they think about their emotions. What should I do? Should I get mad? Should I push back? Should I forgive them? Maybe I could distract my little brother to get him off of wanting to touch my Lego. They can think through things where children with lesser presidential functioning just tend to be impulsive and they don't stop
Yeah.
and think through it. And the third area of the brain, real quickly, that the book covers is your nonverbal system, which is our ability to read others, to read social cues, and is really the seat of empathy, to be able to put ourselves in that other person's position and think about what would I feel if I was that person. It's a really amazing system. And we know that some children tremendously empathetic, other children in the medium, and some not so much. And they don't read
Yeah.
things. They're very still.
You touch on that and definitely emphasize that was something that, as a whole, like a lot of families and children suffered with through COVID because they weren't getting those opportunities
Right,
to read those nonverbal cues
right.
and the social interactions that we're so used to. That was just like shut down for
Oh, it
a
was.
significant portion of time. And when you're 4 years old, now he's 4. He was born actually like in November of 2020. So 6 months
Oh,
after
wow.
everybody was like shutting everything down. And but then that was the year that my older one, he started his 3-year-old preschool. So they were testing it out where all the little kids had to wear masks and stuff,
Oh,
but
yeah.
they didn't seem to think about it. But the point I think about is where the masks also too, it was like
No, you couldn't
even
read.
if children are going in person, they're losing half of
They're
the
losing a lot of the
facial
nonverbal.
cues.
And it was hard on them. I
Yeah.
remember teaching they asked, the preschool teacher asked me to come in to talk to the children about the mask. And there was this mask laying on the floor, all ripped up. And I looked at the other kids and I said, whose is that? And they're like, that's Tommy. He's having a bad day. And I'm like,
Oh,
poor Tommy. So you're right. That delayed the development. And now you have everybody's on their phones. And so with
yeah.
a lot of concerns about teenagers lacking good social skills because they're not making eye contact with others, they're not interacting in person, it's more just on the device. I was meeting with a high school kid who he's on the basketball team and he's trying to make some new friends. He's in a new school, wants to make some friends. And I said, look, it's really easy. Go to practice 5 or 10 minutes early. There'll be other people hanging out and just chat with them. And he looked at me, he said, anybody that's early is on their phone. They're just looking down
Yeah.
at their phone. And I'm like, oh my gosh, that's how you did it in the old days.
And then they're the weirdo for trying to start and
Yeah,
just
what kind of guy is this
yeah.
talking to me?
God, what's the word I'm looking for? Intimidating enough? Just like talking to peers when you're like just trying to small talk. I don't know. I'm not good at small talk and I'm like in my mid to late or 30s. So I guess it depends, but yeah, I just imagine that age group is just it's things are awkward and their anxieties, everything is all over the place.
Yeah,
And so to just a simple task of we'll just go a little bit early and see who you could talk to. That's a big ask, even though as simple as it is, it's really they're just people, right? It took me a long time to realize people are just people.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
it's so
yeah.
but teenagers, their brains, they
Oh,
don't,
and
they're not there yet.
no, and they're very much in terms of construction, they're like a preschooler's brain. So that president, the prefrontal cortex, undergoes massive development from puberty. It's finally finished at age 26 for females and 28 for males before it's all reconstructed. And then your brain is actually getting close to multitasking. real multitasking, which not everybody can do, but your brain speeds up too. When you're like preschool, the electrons travel the transmitters travel at 2 miles an hour. By the time you're 35, your brain is firing at 200 miles an hour. And so if you think about as a mom of two little ones and you're doing a podcast, all the stuff you have going on in your head that you're juggling, right? You're a juggler with 20 balls at once. And that teen brain, that they can't handle all that. It drops in half. The functioning of their president drops in half. So they're impulsive, they're disorganized, they're spacey, and that emotional system gets twice as active, just like a preschooler. So they have twice
Mm,
the emotional output as elementary age children or as adults. So when the teen yells at your parents saying, "You don't understand how I feel," they're right. You don't.
yeah,
You can't make that much anymore. What you can do as a
yeah,
parent is remember when you were that age and how intense
yeah,
everything felt. And then the third part for the teen brain is the social piece. So humans have learned to survive by working with others, being part of a group. That's why humans have been so successful. And other animals live in packs, right? And the drive when puberty hits to be in the group, to be connected, you're just obsessed with your friends. And I used to have to teach middle schoolers on Monday morning. Well, all they wanted to do was find out what everybody did over the weekend. They were
yeah,
chatting nonstop. I'm trying to teach your kids. Come on.
yeah,
But that piece really adds to that teen brain. And it takes time for that development. It is a phase. And I think it's critical for parents of any age. You have to realize kids go through developmental phases. Some of them are just delightful. We
yeah.
refer to elementary years when both your kids are in elementary school. We call that the golden age of childhood. And they're just precious. I love teaching fourth grade. My wife was a 27-year-old public school teacher, fourth and fifth grade. They're just fabulous. And then you get the puberty started and the middle school brain. Again, at this time of year now, eighth grade, females are about 2 years ahead in brain development than males. And that starts in utero, actually. When testosterone floods the fetus for a male, it slows down brain
Mm,
development. And at birth, they're about 2 weeks apart. By preschool, they're about 2 years apart. And that with puberty as well. And this time of year, eighth grade girls are already looking like high school females. They look sharp, they're acting more
yeah,
mature. They think the boys are such idiots, and they are.
yeah,
And the middle school guys are still like bouncing ping pong balls. And for them, it's
yeah,
usually around second semester, sophomore year, where they start to show some maturity. But kids go through all these phases. And what I always tell parents, even in the rough phases, never wish a moment away because it goes so fast.
yeah.
And now,
It does. That's why, like, when I was reading through so much of your stuff, it was like, and when I say it was reassuring, because I was like, okay, at least at the bare minimum, I'm confident that as much as I like doubt myself or worry, I found some reassurance in the notion that, and you mentioned this earlier, of where it's pretty much like you can overdo it and it might not have the impact that you think it would. Like you
yeah,
can push them towards a certain thing, or you can have strict rules, or you can have like high expectations of them, but genetically they are who they
they are
are.
who
But
they
it's just
are.
like when they're lacking things, or when they're encountering like obstacles and challenges, and like where it's their basic needs aren't being met, then that's when that that starts to affect them. So I think that was just, it was reassuring, and I felt better because I tend to be, sometimes I feel like a lazy mom, but or like my husband says, I'm a sucker. I'm like soft for them.
Yeah,
I think I just have a lot of patience, and sometimes I just pick my battles. I'm like,
yeah,
I don't, and it's sometimes like when I do snap and when I do raise my voice and stuff, and it's like exactly like you said, it's impossible to keep. That's why I think one of the first chapters, it's okay to lose it. I feel okay. Like I still felt okay because afterwards, I'm like, when I remember, I try to make a point to saying to my kids, especially the 7-year-old, It's like, "I'm sorry I lost my cool. I don't like doing that to you, and it just I didn't appreciate that you weren't listening to me, A, B, and C, whatever." And I would say I definitely do that better with my kids, and I make a point to do it than I do with the hubbub of and with my husband, because I wanna also show them good examples, but my husband and I are so different. We're just, like, back and forth, but we don't always come back to reconciling in front of them, and so that's, like, where I worry about the Discord, but I your text and,
That's
like, some of your
something
notes that
on what you've said. You hit a lot of different things. I'm trying to take notes over
I
here. I'm
know.
like, I couldn't
I'm all
keep
over the
up.
point all over the place,
But
yeah.
the important thing is like the repair, and you have that rapprochement with your kids. And it's also very normal for parents to have different approaches. That's classic. And kids get it. They understand it because they have different teachers. Some teachers are pretty
Mhm.
strict, others are a little more casual. So they know what they can get away with who. They figured
Mhm.
that out really fast, and with mom and dad too. Now, the
Mhm.
key for partners, so if you're a parent with a partner, I was a single parent for about 10 years, but if you have a partner, is having time to yourselves to discuss how are we doing as a team? Is there some areas where we might want to take a little bit more team approach? Or how about some areas we'll just acquiesce to each other? We'll let you handle that. With our daughter, who we adopted at age 7, she's 19 now. So we have kids 19 to 47. Two
Okay.
grandkids. I've been an adoptive parent, a step parent, single parent, you name it. With her, I was the soft one, and she knew how to get to me. And she would often ask her mother, and mom would say no, and I would know.
Yeah.
Then she'd ask me. I'm like, sure,
Yeah.
honey, that sounds great.
Right.
And in third grade, we had to go to Michael's for something for a craft project for school, and she sees this makeup kit. Like it's a box a suitcase you open up, it's got 3 layer
Yeah.
levels. And she's, Daddy, that is the best. That is so awesome. She was working me over. I had no idea that my wife had already told her no makeup till 6th grade. So she worked me over, and sure enough, a couple days later, I went back and I bought it for Christmas, right, from Santa. And I bring it home. My wife said, "What's that?" And I said, "Oh, she's going to be so excited." She said, "She knows she's not allowed to have that. Take it back." And I took it back. So from then on, when my daughter asked me something, I'd say, "Honey, that's above my pay grade. I
Yeah.
can't answer that on my own." And one of the things we did, it was actually our daughter's idea. We set up for texting, it's called the council. And so if our daughter wants something, she has to ask the council. So both my wife and I can respond. Because
Mhm.
if she asks just me, sure, honey.
They
But
had to set up a system for you.
yeah, so I think it's important that you come together now and then, away from the children. You don't want
Yeah.
to disagree with each other in front of them. But then because nothing in that moment is really that important that you can always
Yeah.
change your mind. It's follow
Yeah.
for parents to say one thing and say, I thought about that, and yes, you can do that, or no, we're not doing that. With a
Yeah.
cell phone, we thought we'd get our daughter the smartphone in 6th grade, like all the other children. And my wife's a therapist as well. And after everything we see with our patients with smartphones and in our culture, we decided we'd wait till high school. And so we
Oh,
sat down
I
with
you
her.
guys are so strong and brave.
Oh,
I'm, like,
and we
not
were the
looking
only
forward to
ones.
that point either.
But she was so upset. And then years later, when she was maybe a sophomore, she said, I'm glad you didn't let me have a smartphone in 6th grade. I would have gotten in a lot of trouble with it. And she was very insightful about it. And she didn't miss out on anything. Kids will tell you, I won't
Yeah.
have friends and I won't know what's going on. And she still figured it all out.
Yeah, it's I can totally understand, like, in the moment, but then, like, in retrospect, she looks back and she's, "Yeah, I don't feel like I missed out on anything." Like, she caught up or she found her people, like, she
Yeah.
found the friends she found her group either way. Yeah, that's what I'm nervous about. Cause my son, he's already asking, I'm like it's like, "Can I have a phone when I'm 10?" I'm like, "I don't know, honey. That's not something we're thinking about right now." I just leave it at that because I just say, "I don't know," or "Maybe," or "We'll see," or "It's too early to think about
Yeah.
that." I think he knows, he sees us on our phones, but they both have their tablets too, and we let them play video games,
Yeah.
and I love how you pointed that out also in your like, video games are not a horrible thing, like, they can be
Oh,
fine. There's positives to them.
yeah.
You could also turn to family time. That's what we used to do we don't do it as much anymore, but we used to do that so much, like playing Mario Kart or Mario Super Party. Because like my husband and I were born in the late 80s, like we like are all about that. So
Yeah.
it's like super nostalgic for us, and we get excited when these movies come out. So we're like, we'll go see Sonic with them. We'll take them to go see Sonic
We'll
and the
get the new
Mario movie. Like
edition.
like we're all about it. We get excited for them. We're like, we probably get more excited than they do sometimes.
And
And that's like
gaming,
something that I'm always willing to do with
yeah,
them
and
is like
gaming
play the
with your
video
kids,
games.
they found increases family happiness because you're
Hmm.
in the kids' zone.
Yeah.
Anytime parents go down to what the children are interested in and into, you feel closer. But it's the time. So it's about 30 minutes. And one of the things I
Yeah.
recommend, I think it's chapter 5 or 6, is you do it in chunks. 30-minute
Yeah.
chunks for the younger children, older one can have longer. But what happens is when you get past that, your dopamine levels just shoot up and you're feeling this incredible pleasure. You lose track of time. You're totally hyper focused in that the game. When your parents tells you the time is to turn it off, they always start with, "Well, I just started," or "Let me finish
Yeah.
this level," and then you
Yep.
have to, and it's a battle to get them off. And you'll
Yeah.
see kids who play often, regularly, like during COVID. And I've had more parents tell me when they finally said, "No more gaming, we're taking a break," their sweet child came back. Because what happens when they're gaming, their dopamine levels shoot really high. Then when they finally stop, their dopamine levels drop. And when dopamine levels
Hmm.
drop, you get moody and agitated. It's the same thing with marijuana. Marijuana jacks up your dopamine levels 16 times. But when it wears off, you're in a funk, a little
It
irritable,
takes a while to like
to
balance that back
come back
out.
for your dopamine levels to get back to what I call the sweet spot. But yeah, that's great that you play with your kids. And social media, I have several accounts. I have to for the business and the books and lectures and all that. It's my daughter that teaches me everything. And she tells me for my podcast, I've done deep dives into eating disorders, self harm behavior, pornography, all on TikTok. And she told me what words to type in to get all these different things. And you're like,
There you
holy
go.
shit.
Yeah.
I would have never. I eventually, if I kept looking at the certain videos, I would have got there. But she knew the shortcuts, told me how to do it. So again, it's if you as a parent are on your phone constantly, you're role modeling that to your children, and your children will
Yeah.
do the same thing. So it's really
Yeah.
as a parent, and I always stress with parents, if you pick your kids up from school or they come home, walk home like yours, and you greet them at the door, don't be on the phone. That's time you should have, they should have your full, unless it's an emergency, but they should have your full attention. And if they come and they're in the car with you and you're riding along, talk, talk with your kid. Don't be on your own phone or they're on their devices. That's great time to connect with your kids and very
Yeah.
important time. So it's role modeling that yourselves. We don't have it on at the dinner table, that sort of thing, or we're having breaks from gaming or the phone so that we're together as a family. Now, interesting enough, during COVID, so we know we had a really, and it's still going on, it's decreasing, but this epidemic of teen fragility, child and teen fragility, of mental health issues. And the traditional rates of 20% teenagers have some depression or anxiety. That went up to about 30 to 40% when social media came out. And then
Mm.
with COVID, it was up 40 to 60% in Colorado. We had some of the highest rates. Now, when they looked at the difference between males and females, the boys actually had less. And they think it was because boys were doing more online gaming during COVID with their friends. So they were still having social interaction, where the
Yeah.
girls were typically in the room alone, death scrolling on TikTok, looking up all this stuff, comparing themselves to these other females they're seeing, and just really took a hit mental health wise. Fortunately, the numbers are coming down, although body perception, body image, concerns about body image and trying different unhealthy habits or techniques is still pretty high. The suicide rate has dropped. So some of that's returning back to pre-pandemic levels, but it was really high and very difficult.
Yeah, that's one thing that I noticed too that was I guess I was like when the whole pandemic was happening, it was challenging, but all I could feel was a little bit grateful because my kids were so young. Like I had a newborn at the end of 2020 and then a 3-year-old who just started preschool. So I felt like we dodged a lot of those complications because we're starting out like our
Yeah,
normal routine. It
right.
was like
Yeah,
versus now, if something like that happened now, it would be like we weren't like I looked at it as if, you know what, I'm not in a family of four where four people are trying to share one machine or two laptops, or
right.
we're trying to share the internet and we're all where there's two kids or three kids fighting over one laptop just to feel like do everything they need to do. And I just looked at it that way where because like we're comfortable in like financially,
Yeah,
but I know that there are so many families out there who they didn't have the resources or the school was they were so reliant on the school for a lot of that technology time and even going off on it like food security. There was that's like where I just took a step back and really looked at the big picture because I'm
yeah,
like, you know what, this is rough, but there we're we have it easy for now. Like
yeah,
it's not that bad for us
yeah.
for now.
And,
If
and,
anything,
and that's
maybe
very,
us adults are going a little crazy, but
yeah.
like we're
And
just doing our
I
best
really
here.
like your approach of graciousness and gratitude around that because so many families really were burdened way more than others. And there was a big discrepancy between school districts that could roll out a pretty good online learning platform and others that couldn't. It was
Mhm.
our daughter's freshman year of high school that she missed. There was no learning going on. There was, it was a wash, just a total wash.
Yeah.
And anything that she was supposed to be doing, she found a way to blow off. And the
Yeah.
school didn't really keep track of anything. It was
Yeah.
a nightmare. But that's important to understand that. And there are so many parents. We know that the Surgeon General issued a parental advisory a couple months ago, back this fall, about parents under pressure and the rising rates of depression and anxiety among parents. 41% of parents feel stressed out every day.
Mhm.
46% report times where they can't function as a parent. We've got about 66% of parents whose number one concern is financial. They just can't make
Mm.
ends meet. And there are so many of those families out there. We've got 75% of our parents are afraid of school shootings for their children.
Yeah.
Another
Yeah.
70% are worried about their kids' mental health and social media. So there's tremendous stress on parents. And there's been this cultural thing on momfluencers mostly. There's a few dadfluencers out there.
No, I'm
So,
happy you addressed you in your
but
book for
we
sure.
added a
Yeah.
layer. The layer in the 20s, 2010s, especially really cranked up around academic achievement, and your kids got to go to Stanford or Ivy League schools, and we got to push our kids and test prep and all this stuff. There's no research much on where you go to school and how that affects your life. And then we added this extra layer of parenting stress. You have to do it this way and this way to be a good parent. And I'm like, it's just, I spend most of my mornings when I look at on Instagram, I just write comments back. Oh, this bullshit. There's no
Yeah.
research on that. Please be research based. This has to do with your kid's
Yeah,
brain. It's
yeah.
not about how you're parenting. Actually, in the research, there's only one thing they've ever found that a parent can pass on to their kids that will benefit them for their lifetime. And it's not money. Money burns out when you're about 30. So it helps you get a car, a job, nice house, married sooner, but it doesn't guarantee lifelong happiness or good mental health. The only thing they've ever found in the research is parental kindness. So if you
Mm,
as, and you seem very kind to me, if you
mm,
as a
thanks.
person, if you're as a parent are kind to the neighbors, you're kind to the grocery workers, you're kind to the post person, you're kind to others, your children will become kind as well. And being kind, we know in the research that being kind gives as much back to you as the person that receives your kindness. It fills your heart. And your kids will do that the rest of their lives. But beyond, there isn't anything you're going to do that's going to really change your child's trajectory. You just love them,
Yeah,
attain
I
them.
love that because I get compliments that people say that I'm really good at getting them to say please and thank you. I'm like, for me, that's like the bare. That's the bare minimum,
Yeah,
like, at the very least, have good manners and just be respectful when you're
yeah.
out, like, somebody asks you, "Do you want something?" Like, I've just a couple instances where my son will be like, "No, thank you," and my
Oh,
friend will come to me and repeat it to me, they're like, "Oh, your kids are so polite," and I'm just like, "Oh, yay," like, they
yeah,
did it without me being around, without having to tell them to, like, "Hey, what do you say?" Say, "Thank you," say, "Please," like, they do it, they're starting to do it on and that's it's for me, that's just, like, the basic because I always even if I don't really it's second nature to me, like, right now, it's where I just say, "Thank you," or "Please," or I just do it so that I don't have to, like, consciously do it, but with them, I do so that
yeah,
hopefully they get those habits where they just say even if they're, like, in a bad mood, they can, like it costs nothing to say please, it costs nothing to say thank you, even if you're walking around all grumpy, just, "Okay, thank you," like, just it's a simple
that's
thing, and
easy
so
to,
I love the kindness that can
yeah,
transfer down because because that is something for me that I really wanna stress, even if they're not brainiacs, they're not the smartest people in the world, they're not making, like, millions of dollars every year, at the very least, I want them to be, like to just be happy and to treat people, like, with respect and to not
yeah,
be an
yeah.
asshole, like, that I just don't want my kids to
That
turn out to be assholes. I don't want them to be racists or, like, that's, like,
you
really
just
the basic
want them
minimum,
to
I'm like, as long as they don't turn out like those ugly parts of people, like, I then
yeah,
I'm happy, I'll be a happy
yeah.
mom.
You just want them to respect basic human dignity. And one of the chapters
Yeah.
in the book is the importance of volunteer work for your kids and for your
Mhm.
family. And I've had the pleasure for the last 40 years. I started a program for mental health consumers. And what we used to say is people with chronic mental illness, like schizophrenia or severe PTSD. We've had a lot of veterans. And it's at my small little church in our neighborhood. And we have about 40 or 50 every month for a dinner. And we play bingo and we give away soap and shampoo and basic necessities. And it's just fabulous. And my son, who's now 32, started when he was 3 months old coming. I'd take him and he'd help me carve the Thanksgiving turkeys every year. And I got to
Oh.
chronicle every year with pictures. And my daughter, then, when she joined our family, she started coming. And she calls the greatest bingo games. One time we had two people get bingo, and she was like, "It's a miracle!" And she's
Yeah.
screaming and hollering. But what meant so much to me is that for both my kids, they don't see those our guests as strange or weird. They're people, and they treat them with dignity. And our
Yeah.
guests love it because nobody treats them with dignity. And I think it's passing that orientation on to your kids is critical and so important for your mental health, their mental health, and for our society's mental health. There is a
Yeah.
lot of unkindness right now going around, that's for sure. And we really need to
Yeah.
return to that. Oh, I
Yeah,
get all my
it's
stuff.
that's the hard part of it is, like, in school, it's like you can't with their peers, you can't really control or monitor everything that someone else's kids are saying, and so that's the only thing I could see is, like, me being worried about is just I don't know what kinda habits or things that they're picking up because it's, "Oh, everybody that's how everybody acts," and
Yeah,
it's, "Oh, that's what people are doing," but I really don't so far, I don't really see a whole lot of troubling behavior, at least not from that. They might say, like, some trending phrases where I'm like, "What are you talking about?" It's just
they
but
picked up
that's
the
gonna be like
lingo.
almost any yeah, exactly. So I'm like, "What? Can you not?"
Yeah.
I'm like,
Oh, there. That's
your brother's gonna start saying it."
he will too, and he's going to teach the other preschoolers. But
Yeah,
that's
no.
how things trickle down with kids. And child development's no different than it ever was in the brain. What is different is our culture. And when I was in third grade, me and my buddies, we got in trouble because we were in the library and we looked up the F word in the Oxford Dictionary. And we looked up the slang term for vagina. We didn't know, we'd never heard the word vagina, but we tried to find the slang words. And then we got caught by the librarian. We had to go to the principal's
Oh,
office.
no.
Now, kids can just look it all up online. And back in middle school, your first exposure to porn was if your mom had a J.C. Penney catalog and they had the
Mm,
bra section. And as a sixth
right.
grade boy, you're like, whoa, that's incredible.
Yeah.
Right now, it's online, and you have third and fourth graders who are seeing pornography. And,
Yeah.
and then you're just like, where in the world did this come from?
then
Sometimes
you
they
have
just
to.
stumble on it. Other times they hear things from the other kids and then they check it out.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Like maybe you can do your best, but then somehow somebody finds something, or because he goes to like after school programs like for working parents where they have people who are watching kids. So he interacts with like older kids after school like a few times a week, and
I
who
do.
knows?
Yeah, they're
Mhm.
going to hear
Mhm.
stuff. They always do. And what's the saying? Little pitchers have big ears. They
Yeah.
love to listen, and they listen to mom and dad through your door, and they'll listen to the
Yeah.
older kids. That's just the nature of children.
How would you handle that then if somebody as young as my kid was encountering something like that? Or because we did have something like where it was like on one of their, it was like one of the school issued, I think it was like an iPad, a school issued
Yeah.
iPad where they found the search history. Like it was a group of kids that were doing it, and my son was in that group, and it was just like the principal, he called us and talked to us. It's not that serious. It
Oh, yeah.
happens like
It
every
does.
year. We see it happen all the time. And he just explained like what they said and what they talked about and stuff like that. So it was like an understanding where when we approached it, we were like, "Do you understand why that wasn't appropriate to be
Yeah.
looking at?
Good.
Do you understand why
Yeah.
we had to have a talk about it?" Things like that.
Yeah.
And so we just so I don't know if are there any other things that you would recommend? Because I know it's going to come up either way, and
Well,
I'm
it
just
it
the
will.
only thing
And
I see it is
you
okay. I'm just going to have a conversation I might not be ready for, but it's
Yeah,
going to have to happen.
and
It's
be ready.
you
There's many times my wife
yeah.
and I are so thankful we didn't have to parent little ones with phones and
Yeah.
everything that's out there. It was much easier. But you handle it great. I would tell parents, expect it. It's coming. And it's part
Yeah.
of normal development, and it's just coming earlier to kids because of what's out there. And then you
Yeah.
don't want to overreact and get all freaked out. But just say, oh, tell me what that was about. So you're always, a query is always good with kids. Oh, that's an interesting thing the kids were looking up. Where did they hear about that? Or, and how'd you start to look at it? Oh, okay. Yeah, that's some stuff that's out there. And then you want to talk about your family values. How does this fit with our family's values of human dignity for all people? So I've had my my son when he was in middle school, a friend of his showed him some pictures online that were on my heart. We just had a desktop computer in my office, and I found Britney's boobs in the search bar. There's Britney
Oh, no.
Spears, and I'm like, get in here right now. You
Busted.
know, what's going on? And he's, oh, my friend told me about it, and I said, okay, don't be looking that stuff up anymore. It's out there, but it's called porn. And about three
Yeah.
months later, we this I guess a cookie got put on my computer, and I'm online doing work, and this naked woman showed up in a little box,
Oh, no, the
inviting me to the
algorithm got
website,
you or
and
yeah.
I'm like, "Come in here, honey. We need to talk."
Yeah.
And so the consequence was I put a password on the computer. I'd never had a password, and then I had him read. There was an article in the Denver Post about the porn industry and the objectification of women, and I made him read it and write me a paper about what was
Okay.
wrong with that. And that was it for then. And then later on in seventh grade, later in seventh grade, I hated doing the password myself. And I said, "Can I
Mhm.
take it off?" And he looked at me and he said, "No." And that's when I realized he was maturing. He actually knew and he was able to admit, yeah, he was tempted. And that would be a
Yeah.
good thing. And when he graduated
Yeah.
from eighth grade, I gave him his first laptop. I said, if you have a problem with it, it's on you. You can pay for the
Yeah.
repairs or whatever, just don't touch mine.
Yeah.
And he never really developed a problem with any of that stuff. But and that was
It's like a
the
healthy
early
approach
that was
instead
the
of just
early
saying
days.
no, putting the blindfold on and just no, don't we don't do because it's natural to be like curious about that
Oh
stuff
yeah.
too. It's just
Yeah.
it doesn't have to be this big taboo thing. It's there are certain ways we approach it, and here's why like why society either likes it or why this could be problematic.
Yeah.
This isn't real, this is not it's things like that. You just have to be prepared for it.
Yeah.
So
And
I totally it's that's why I'm like, I don't and I know boys, they're gonna get so gross in 5 or 10 years anyway, and it's just another thing to add to add to, like, the list of things to prepare for
and
now.
with AI now, it adds a whole nother dynamic. A couple
God,
nights
yeah.
ago, we were driving home. We went out for dinner with our daughter, and she likes to follow all the social. She's got her people that she follows, and she tries to stay up with news. And she knew about the fires in California, and she said, "Oh, I saw the
Mm,
most apocalyptic picture of the Hollywood sign burning up. It was just horrifying." And I was thinking in the car, I didn't hear about that on NPR. And so when
mm,
we got home, I looked it up, and it was an AI hoax. in one eye.
Oh no.
So I was like, honey, that was a hoax. And she
Yeah.
said, I try to spot those, but I missed that one. So that adds a whole nother layer. But it's
God, I
parenting's
know, and
is
it's like something that that's a new challenge for us. It's because a lot are dealing with so many things that generations prior to that didn't have to deal with. But like now, in addition to that, consequently, our parents are dealing with things that previous parents, like generations of
yeah,
parents, have never had
yeah.
to
They
deal with.
did.
So like the whole AI thing, it terrifies me
Oh
because
yeah,
I'm like, it's not just like with visual, audio, or video. It's with, you mentioned the chat GPT. It's with the content, the text generation, and manipulating all that. And it's so much. And it's so hard to not feel so overwhelmed by all of that. So I can't imagine people, parents of teenagers, like a huge learning curve.
yeah,
And
yeah,
unfortunately, I feel like parents are just like behind the bill a bit.
yeah. It's and the problem with parenting always, this is for all parents over time, you're always a developmental phase behind your kids. Just as you figure
Hmm.
out how to parent for that developmental phase, they go into
Yep.
the next one. And you're always playing catch up. You're trying to catch up
Yep.
to where they are.
Like they.
Grandparenting, being grandparents, are easier because we've seen all the phases. So now we
Mhm.
get it, and you have a more historical background. Oh yeah, that's just a phase. This is what's going on. But when you're in it, you're always playing catch up. But it's
Yeah.
the exposure, and one of the things I put in the book, in Shame Free Parenting, pretty much at the beginning was, let's leave the librarians alone. We're trying to ban
Mm.
books at some school. But everything that could be known in human existence, the most heinous stuff, is in the palm of your hand. So why are we trying to ban some classic books
Low hanging
as it might
fruit. I
get
don't
kids
know.
to think about these things when it's all right there and they get exposed to it
Hmm.
all the time?
Like
Hey,
you can search for a book or search for the text online. It's what, and it could be worse. Exactly, like you're
oh,
saying.
it's there's so many different stories of that. But if I could just jump back to one thing you said earlier, you had mentioned about corporal punishment. You mentioned yelling at your kids. So if you follow the momfluencers out there, you'd think every parent is just a raving lunatic yelling at their kids all the time and hitting them, and that's not true at all. In the research, 90% of parents try to explain things to their children first. If that doesn't work, then they try to distract their child or get them to do something else, which is a good strategy. After that is when they start to raise their voice. My hairstylist, she has two young ones, and she said, if they'd listen to me the first 5 times asked, I
Yeah.
wouldn't have to yell, right? And if the yelling doesn't work, there's about 27% of parents who might do corporal punishment. Now, my own view on that, it is legal by the state here in Colorado. Many European countries, it's illegal. As long you can spank your child as long as it's not too hard, right? You're abusing them. But the only times, and I'm naturally a gentle parent anyway, so I didn't really go to that routine. My dad only spanked me twice my whole life when I was little. I think there's sometimes when a child's safety is in danger. So your little one, let's say your youngest one, runs right through the red stop sign and crosses the street and almost gets hit by a car. You're going to react and you're going to grab them hard and pull them back and yell and maybe give them a little swat on the bottom. I think if it's a matter of life safety, then that's a meaningful lesson. Your kid's going to remember that, and they're going to remember to
Mm.
stop at stop signs. That will never go
Hmm.
away. Now, if you're yelling and spanking all the time, it will have no meaning whatsoever.
Yeah.
If it is
Yeah.
something you decide to do as a parent, the problem is many parents, if they do spank, they're already escalated. And spanking should only be done in a very calm fashion. That this is really unacceptable, and I am going to give you a spanking for that, not when you're out of control. And that's where parents need to take a break and calm themselves
Yeah.
down first. I'm not a big fan of that. There's not a lot of research that it helps. Other than if it's a safety issue and you want to imprint that on your child, I think you're going to be fine with that one. But other than that, I'm not really big into that. Never really liked, and I never put a hand on my kids. Once, when my son was in preschool, he took his seatbelt off in the car seat while we were on the highway.
Oh
And
God.
I
Yeah.
pulled over and gave him a little swat on the bottom. I just said that we cannot
Mm.
do that. That is unacceptable.
Mm-hmm.
Never had to with my
Because
daughter.
then they can gauge the level of seriousness of the
Yes, you really
issue.
have to think what would warrant something that severe, and most things don't.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the time, the stuff that goes on in a family, none of it's very really that important. It's the fact that you aren't listened to, and it goes on, and you can
You
only
sound
ask
like a
so
broken
many.
record player. Yeah.
Yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
that's why the consistency piece. There are sometimes, so if you have the rule, okay, don't leave your tennis shoes in the living room, fine. Then you would normally tell your child, come out of your room, take your shoes away. That's being a consistent parent, right? But there's times when it's 8 o'clock, you're dead tired, your kids in their room doing their homework or maybe on their gaming thing, and you know if you ask, it's going to cause an argument, and you're just too tired to handle anymore. In that case, just grab the shoes and throw them by your kid's door. You don't have all the time because sometimes parenting is a very brain damaging sport. It really is. You get a lot of gray hair from it. And I have plenty to show you. But I think if I could leave, because I know we've been talking for quite some time, which has been delightful. I've really enjoyed it.
Oh, like I
But
know. I was gonna say this hour went by.
the last two things I tell parents, and I do this activity at my lectures, is at the start of the lecture, I have them all think of a time where they felt shame or guilt about something they did as a parent. And they don't have to share it. I share mine, which was losing it with my daughter when a week before eighth grade graduation, this was at the start of COVID, and they were trying to do online school at the little Catholic school, which really wasn't very effective. And her eighth grade teacher, a week before graduation, called us up and said she's missing like 40 assignments and wouldn't graduate. And man, I got lit.
Yeah.
Now, when I was telling the story, my daughter was at the book table and she spoke up and she said, I don't even remember that. I'm like, oh, I do. Uh, and then the cute part of it is,
And it was what, like 4 or 5 years ago?
yeah,
And
she's
she doesn't.
19. She didn't remember. And the next morning, I wanted to apologize. When I sat down on her bed, I said, I'm so sorry that I got so upset last night. And she looked at me and said, it's okay, Daddy. It's COVID. It has us all stressed. Now, right then, I want to say, no, it was you
Yeah.
not doing your assignments.
Yeah.
But I didn't. I just accepted it, said, thank you, honey. And we'll be getting those done this week because you'll be at the dining room table too. They're completed. And she got them done and she graduated. But there's so many times that you think, oh, I've damaged my child, and they don't even remember it. And when you ask a kid, what's a time you remember with your parents? Often the parents will be like, I don't even remember that. It was so small to you, but to them it was a big thing. So it's hard to tell. But the one thing I like to do when we talk at the end about letting go of any of that guilt or shame, and I tell them about the Gottman principle. Gottman was a psychologist and relationship specialist. And he said, in any relationship, and he did most of his work on couples, marital couples, but it's a 5-to-1 ratio. For every one moment of discord, if you have 5 positives, you have a great relationship. You don't have a problem. And so I ask the parents, before I tell them the principle, I say, tell me things you did this morning that were positive for your kid. Woke them up with a good morning, honey, made them breakfast, made sure they had their notebook and their lunch was packed, took them to school, walked them to school, told them you loved them, gave them a goodbye kiss. There are hundreds of things you, as a mom yourself, Megan, do every day that is adding to this giant stained glass window. So think of your child's development as this huge stained glass window with billions of pieces of glass. And every day you're putting in hundreds of beautiful, perfectly magnificent colored pieces of glass into their stained glass window of who they are. Now, sure, when you yell or we get upset, maybe your kid has a couple pieces of glass that's not so pretty, but it doesn't compare to all the beautiful
Mm,
pieces of glass that you put into your kids every day.
mm-hmm.
And that's why you don't really need to worry about, oh, I'm not that perfect parent. You don't have to be. You just have to be this side of good enough. You can relax. You follow your natural instincts. You're going to do just fine, and you love them a lot, and give them, teach them to be resilient, teach them to be independent, and nature is going to do the rest. You aren't going to dope down your kid because you yell too much. because parents have their own temperament
Yeah.
too. And
Yeah.
some parents,
Yeah.
not all parents are Winnie the Pooh. Plenty of
No.
parents, there's plenty of rabbits, there's plenty of piglets, right? And your temperament
Yep.
doesn't go away. That stays with you your whole life.
No. And that's just another thing that like is just part of the environment that the child learns how to deal with. I think because my husband and I are so different, I think my children have definitely started to notice like the just like growing up in such a dichotomy like
It,
of our community how
that's good because then they
yeah.
learn how to relate to different people. And someday they're
Yeah.
going to be heading off to college and they're going to have roommates for the
Yeah.
first time. And you learn
Yeah.
pretty quick. People do all things differently than you did or the way your
Yes.
family did it. And you're going to have
Yes.
different bosses with different personalities. Not every, not everybody's going to care what you feel.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
right now this trend is, oh, whatever your child feels is the most important thing in the world. Survival's first, and
Yeah.
learning to get your work done and do things. That's the
Yeah.
basis of survival. And
Yeah.
if you have time to talk to your kids about their feelings or cause of behavior, great. And that's part of validating their emotions. Many of the time it's after the fact, so it's after the blow up, after they've had a timeout or whatever, and then you talk and you help them understand why they acted the way they did and you build their insight. But when you're getting the kids to school in the morning and your little one is fussing and doesn't want to go to school, and your older one is, I don't want to walk, it's too cold, would you drive
Yeah.
me? You're not going to be the most calm person on the planet. And if you were going to, there are a few momfluencers who do the real mom thing, and they're hysterical and they're fabulous. They're like, okay, day 3, I'm wearing the same outfit. I haven't brushed my
Yeah.
hair in 2 days. The kids just ate the
Yeah.
same breakfast they had 2 days ago, and we're
Yep.
just trying to get out the door.
Yep. I no, I'm like right there with you where I appreciate that realness of it, where it's just yeah, house is I but I know there's a certain like group of it's not like the tidiest, it's like always disorganized, but I'm like if I'm expecting people over, I'll take care of it. Right now, it's just it's not unless like I can get to a certain amount of time, like duration of time where it starts to like cause me like anxiety where it's really I feel like I can't look over it anymore and then maybe that's when I get, like, a little anxious about it, but I totally appreciate those accounts where it's just, "No, this is us. We're just taking one day at a time,
Yeah,
and
we're
my hair
getting
is
by.
the casualty of that."
Yeah, that's all you have to do.
Yeah.
Make sure they're
Yeah.
fed.
Yeah,
Or-
that's really, like, my unsolicited advice to anybody is just one day at a time,
yeah,
and it's hard not to compare, but it's as long as you, like, love the shit out of them, it's hard to mess up, at least
it
in my
is. If
opinion.
you're
It's if you just
attached
care
to
about
them
them, you
and
love
love
them.
them and take care of them, the other stuff fades away over time. And some of those things will become the tales at family reunions 15, 20,
Yeah.
25 years later when the kids are like, Mom, remember that time? And then
Yeah.
and you're all laughing about it because it
Or you're
really,
just like, "No, I have no idea what you're talking about,
yeah,
honey." I think like,
we don't
imagine
remember that.
that.
Those become family folklores, and your kids learn, and they'll be just fine. And I was
Yeah.
asked in a radio interview with Colorado Public Radio several months ago, and they said, "What's something you did for your kids that you think was so important?" And so my son, I raised. I was a single dad when he was about 7 till he was about 17 when I got remarried to my wife now. And for him, I just said, I thought for a while, and I said, nothing. I just tried to stay out of his way. He was I just let him do what he wanted to do. He wasn't particularly driven academically when he was younger in elementary school. He didn't really care about it. Eighth grade math teacher just took him to a whole new level. And he was a tough teacher. But that's when my son really took off. And now he's a surgeon. And
Oh,
when he
wow.
was younger, I'd be like, you're doing your homework while you're watching TV? The parent thing, right? And he'd look at me and say, I have all A's. I'm like, okay. And I just knew instinctively I could go after this or that, but it would make no difference. And he just needs to be who he's going to be. Now, our
Yeah.
daughter we adopted at 7, and she doesn't mind me sharing this. She actually shares her story at some of my lectures sometimes. She had some attachment issues from her birth mother and
Mm.
grandmother and loss as her grandmother died when she was 3. That's who was raising her. And it was an abusive situation after that till we adopted her. And she has ADHD and bipolar. So we've learned a lot about that. And for her, I said, we had to be really consistent with her. And she told me it was last spring, no, 2 springs ago, I took her prom dress shopping for the senior prom. And I was in tears watching her come out of the
No.
dressing room in her dress, looking like a young woman. I'm crying. And we're driving home and
Yeah.
talking about what an amazing experience was. And she said, it took me about 10 years to trust you and mom. And she said, I finally, mostly because of mom, that I knew when mom says something, it's going to happen no matter what. And it always does. And so she really, because of this disruption she experienced early in life, she really needed that consistent foundation of love and support,
Yeah.
clear rules. And if we told her we were going to do something for her, we did it. And that's when, and it was just this golden moment of, wow, like she finally trusts us. Yeah, and
So
all kids need different
validating.
things, but you'll see over time.
I bet, yeah, I would have been crying there with you if
Yeah,
Mike, like, if your daughter said that to you, and just it speaks to your parenting style or how much work you guys put in into the point where she made it where she felt comfortable enough to like say that to you,
yeah,
like say that to
yeah,
your face.
yeah.
That's so important.
But and it was
I
in the
love that.
car while we were driving, and that's a great tip for parents of teenagers. They'll talk to you more in the car because they don't have to
Yeah.
look at you. You're
Yeah.
driving, right? And so you have to be driving and looking ahead, and they can just open up about stuff. And then as soon
Yeah.
as you get home, they don't want to talk. They're
Yeah.
done. But that's often a good time with your teens and your kids too, just to talk in the car.
Yeah, in the car, it's well, the 4-year-old, sometimes he'll fall asleep or he just wants to listen to music,
Yeah.
like a specific like a song he'll ask me to put on. The 7-year-old, he'll that yeah, maybe I just remember when I was younger, I would or when he was younger, I would try to make a point to ask him about his day and trying to use those questions, like those buzz questions of, "Oh, what's something good that you remember that happened today?" And after a while, he was like, "Mommy, you always want to talk about my day. I just don't feel like talking about it." I'm
No?
like, "Okay, honey,
Yeah,
like
they
that's
don't. The trick I like, the one thing parents should never do when you see your kid after school, whether if it's they come home on the bus or you pick them up, is say the first thing should never be how much homework do you have.
mm,
That is a total buzzkill, and it's
mhm.
just horrible. And the amount of homework kids have between 1980 and 1995, the amount of homework high school kids got doubled, and I'm sure it's doubled again since. It's just overwhelming.
Yeah,
But no one wants to be reminded of work when you first get, you want to
no.
relax. If you talk about things they like, for my son, anything with sports, any Denver sports, our hockey team, our basketball team, football team, college football team, those were go to standbys. Or if I got information from parents or the teacher, they're changing seats today. And then you can
Oh,
ask, oh, who
okay.
are you sitting by now? So and I like in the book I talk about fly fishing for feelings. It's
Oh, yeah.
if you know how to fly fish. Bait fishing, you just put a worm on a hook, throw it in the lake, and that fish swallows the whole thing, and you just reel it in. With fly fishing, it's incredibly hard, but you're trying to trick that fish into thinking that's a live bug, and you're just putting it out there. You just delicately lay it out there, and you pull it back, and you try another spot. You switch flies. You might go through 10 different flies before you get a bite. You're just throwing it out there, and that's what you do with feelings. So if you say, "How are you feeling?" you're going to get the F word. Fine.
Yeah.
How was your day? Fine. You have to be a little more creative and just throw things out about their day or things they like.
See what sticks.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Or I heard
Yeah.
something on the radio today that I thought you would listen, you would like, and you tell them what you heard on the radio.
I know. At this point, I'm just like grateful that I'm just like, yeah, like how you said, like just cherishing like all the moments as hard as it is to appreciate the bad moments too, or like the less favorable ones,
Yeah,
because it's just it does. I look at my kid, like my second grader, and he's a little person and asking more complex
yeah,
questions and picking up on more things and being a big old goofball. And it's really funny because when I look at him, sometimes I'll remember, I'm like, I remember when he was a little hot loaf, like, in my
yeah.
arms, like,
Oh,
little
I know.
God,
We
and I'm
drift.
just like, "Where did that go?
It
Like,
goes,
how did we get here?
and
How did that
every year
happen?" And
it goes even faster. And just
yeah.
be ready, and especially with boys, they can be very primitive sometimes. And nowadays, everybody's the perfect play dates, right? And the parents are taking pictures. I hate the term play date because it means parents are in charge. Where kids should just
Mm,
be have free play. There's plenty of research on the value of kids just learning to solve problems on their own. They do it. But if there's
yeah.
adults around, they defer to the adult. And one day I picked up my son, he was like first, second grade, from his friends because I was a single dad and I had to work. So he would go home every Monday, I think it was, no, Tuesdays with this boy to his house, and then I'd take the boys on Mondays. And I picked him up about 6:15, and we're driving home. I'm like, what'd you guys do? And he said, we ran under Spencer's pee, his older brother. What? He said, yeah, Spencer stood up in the treehouse and he peed, and we ran back and forth underneath it. And I'm like, okay, that's not one I'm putting on social media. That's boys.
That's a free play. That's what they come up with when
Yeah, they all kinds of stuff.
Oh my
But
god.
yeah, you
Yeah,
have to
I'm not
appreciate it all. And again, never wish a moment away, even in the hard
yeah.
times, because then it's gone. And then all of a sudden they're leaving for college, and then all of a sudden
Mm,
they have their own house or they're married, and then you get the joy of
I know.
grandkids, which is fabulous. But
Yeah,
I still remember my son in my arms when he was a little infant.
I know. Like, the first time he called me "bruh," I was like, "No."
Hey, bro.
I was like, "No." He still calls me mommy sometimes, but he's "bruh." I'm like, "What?" I the fir yeah, it was definitely like a culture shock moment when he first called me that, and I'll tell my friends that. I'm like, "No, he's already there. He's already there."
I love
I
that.
know, yeah,
Just,
it's not, like, even disrespectful either. I'll ask him a question like, "Well, why didn't you tell me this?" He's, "Bruh, I didn't even know." He's just like, "I
it's
didn't even know." It was
vernacular.
a simple thing of yeah,
Yeah.
it could just be like a simple, innocent dude. He's not it yeah. So, I'm gonna wrap this up because otherwise we would just be,
Could I
like,
tell you one?
talking.
Could I tell you one last
Yeah,
story?
of
This
course.
is the long-term view, and parents need to have a long-term view and not the short-term. And I had the experience this fall of going back to see my mom, who's 98, and
Mm,
she has dementia. She still knows who I am, but her short-term memory is pretty much shot. But she's as delightful as ever. And on the way there, I stopped for a weekend in the Ozarks to do some mountain biking, and then I wrote down all the things I learned from her, and I got to read it to her. And it was everything that my mom gave me. I talked to her about. And the sweetest thing, she was sitting next to me in a rocker, and I was holding her leg and reading to her. And we finished. Some of the stuff she remembered, some she didn't. But she looked at me and she said, "You're a good boy."
oh,
It's like I was in my mom's lap when I was 3, still there. So that
oh,
all that love you're putting in your kids, that's going to be there forever. And it was just
mm,
a beautiful experience. And I end every my podcast, I end of every show with a story about things of beauty make me cry. And it's all beautiful stuff, mostly about kids or things in the world that I just find so amazing. And having my 90-year-old mother tell me that meant a lot.
that's yeah, and you probably didn't even see it coming. You did not expect it to affect you like it did.
I'm tearing up now.
Yeah, oh, that's so special. Ugh, gosh, and even with her mind being a
Yeah,
little bit compromised, is what comes out.
yeah. And
Oh my
she, in our
goodness.
hearts, we're connected as ever. And
Oh,
so, on your most stressful days as a parent, have a long-term view. It's going to be
yeah,
okay. As long
that's
as you're
solid. That's
just this
solid
side of
advice
good enough,
again.
everything's going to be work out as it does.
That's so reassuring and comforting, and it just really gives us perspective, like, parents and listeners or listeners who are readers who are parents, just to give them the big picture of just that reassurance of your expectations of yourself, like, where that guilt comes from. It might be because you're comparing yourself or you're setting expectations too high,
Yeah,
when it's just like parenting it's like there's so many layers to it, and it's just like whatever like, at the end of the day, just as long as, like, their basic needs are met and you are being, like, kind and you're loving them and you're giving them structure, that's, like, the basic that's gonna set them up for
yeah,
a great upbringing,
yeah,
great development.
yeah.
And it
That's all
sounds
they
so
need.
simple, but, like, it really is, though. It's like when you break it down, you strip it down to the basics, that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, this has been
Craig
lovely. Thank you
Knippenberg.
so much.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Shame-free parenting, building resiliency in times of hardship, guns, and social media. I recommend this to parents. And it was a quick, short read too,
It,
light. It's
yeah,
there's a lot in there, but it's again, it's so valuable. This conversation was so valuable. I recommend it to anybody who just wants to like peek in a little bit and get some more out of whatever they're looking for. They can get peek in and see what you got to say about it, but I almost guarantee that they're gonna end up devouring the whole thing just because it's a
I've
good you
designed it to be a
structure it
quick
well
read.
and you get to the point. I love it. Yeah. But yeah, and if oh, where can we find you online and on social media?
So my social media tag or whatever. What do you call it? My name is The Legit Parent, and my podcast is called Legit Parenting. So legitimate, but legit
Perfect.
parenting. And it's on
Perfect.
Spotify and Apple. Both my books are on Amazon. The first one, Wired and Connected, is more like a handbook for parents. It tells you about all sorts of situations and how to handle them. But it's on social, emotional, and behavioral development for grades K through 6. And that's
Mhm.
called Wired and Connected. And if you type in Knippenberg with a K, it's
Yeah.
KNI. Yeah.
Yeah.
Instead of the German, you can find it there. And then on social media, I guess that's just what I post under. Is that I have somebody do it
Yeah,
for
thank you, Craig Knippenberg. Thank you so much. And if and when you're working on anything else in the future, feel free to come back. I'd love to
Oh,
chat
I
again.
would love to. Thank you so much, Megan. God bless.
And there you go. That was Craig A. Knippenberg talking about his book, Shame Free Parenting. That book is available now. Check out the show notes where you can find links where to purchase the book and follow and find Craig on social media. While you're perusing social media for your favorite authors and what they've got going on, find Cantina Book Club on your favorite social media, cantinabookclub.com if you're looking for book recommendations. I'm writing reviews on all sorts of genres. Rate, review, subscribe, all that good stuff. Find your favorite authors and their work and give them a rating and review on Amazon and Goodreads. It really does help them out as well as pre orders and orders in general. And as always, thank you guys so much for listening.